The Haunting Himalayas, a book written by Rajni Sekhri Sibal, available on Amazon. The story Heart, Liver, Kidney is narrated by me, Maninder Kalra, and my son, Keerat Kalra. What you took away from me?
Heart, liver, kidney.
Neil heard a senior student at St. Thomas Boys' School whisper,
Heart, liver, kidney. Heart, liver, kidney.
All the other students ragging Neil in the senior boys' common room chanted in unison. Neil looked at their fierce faces. There were 8 of them. They looked almost sinister in the moonlight streaming in through the window. It was enough to scare any 13-year-old. But Neil was made of sterner stuff. He was born in the forests of Madhya Pradesh, where his father was a forest officer. He had grown up with all forms of wildlife and was fearless. That evening, he did not allow his eyes to flicker and stared back confidently at the boys ragging him on his first day at school. Neil was a dreamy boy and had a rather fertile imagination. Although he loved forests, he always wanted to study in a boarding school in the hills. His parents had given in to their son's desire. They had driven up to Nainital, a town in the Himalayas, built around a natural crescent-shaped freshwater lake. The town was bustling with activity and had several residential schools for boys and girls. St. Thomas Boys' School was a boarding school situated beyond the graveyard that was built on the other side of Lake Naini. Neil unpacked his trunks and met some boys from his class in the dormitory who took the new boy around the school.
Newcomer?
A stocky senior asked as he passed the group of boys chatting in the corridor.
Come to the common room below the seniors' dormitory after dinner tonight.
Be careful. They'll rag you.
A boy standing close to Neil said.
That's okay. We have all been ragged at some point of time or the other. They'll only tell you to sing a song or dance or polish 10 pairs of shoes. Just do what they ask you to do.
Advised another.
But don't be cheeky, or else they'll really give you a very difficult punishment.
Chipped in a boy who wore spectacles. Ragging in St. Thomas was a way to get to know a new boy, although it was banned in the school after what happened that evening. After dinner, a boy of class 9 was sent to escort Neil to the senior boys' common room, where 8 seniors were waiting for him. Neil told them his name but refused to dance to the latest Western pop song in the Bharatnatyam style.
I can't and I won't. That's stupid.
What cheek!
Said a tall and lanky boy with a laugh.
Stop being cheeky. Do you want to be punished?
Said Sanjay, the stocky boy who had met Neil in the corridor that afternoon.
You think I'm scared of you? I'm not scared of anything.
Sanjay jumped up from his chair and whispered into Neil's ears.
Heart, liver, kidney. Heart, liver, kidney. Heart, liver, kidney.
2 boys were dispatched to the biology laboratory to bring back some preserved anatomical specimens. The 3 jars containing a dead goat's heart, liver, and kidney, preserved in formaldehyde, were emptied out on the table in the common room. Fumes of formaldehyde from the jar made Neil feel faint. The specimens of a heart, a liver, and a kidney were then placed on Neil's hands. He was not aware that they belonged to a dead goat. His hands began to shake and he wanted to vomit. But he simply pursed his lips, outstretched his palms, and refused to apologize.
You saw the graveyard outside the boundary walls when you came up to school, Neil?
Neil nodded.
You aren't scared, are you?
Said Sanjay, who was indeed the leader of the group of senior boys who were ragging Neil.
Of course he isn't. Didn't he just say that he was not scared of anything?
said a lanky boy.
Okay, smart Alec. We'll believe you aren't scared of anything if you take a dead man this gift.
Sanjay said.
Take back his heart, liver, and kidney to the dead man. Enter the graveyard and go to the first grave on the right as you enter. The dead man wants his organs back.
Sanjay glared as the boy sniggered, and another put his hand in his mouth to control his laughter.
He's regretting that he donated the organs to our biology lab before he died. He's missing them now. He'll survive with this one kidney. Go give him back his organs. He keeps begging for his heart, liver, and kidneys. Place the dead man's organs on the gravestone and come back here. We will wait for you, and if you are successful, we shall declare that you are the bravest of the brave in St. Thomas.
Neil sighed. He was not going to let on that he was rather nervous by now. The organs in his hand felt yucky. The moon was full, and it lit Neil's path all the way to the graveyard. He walked with the organs in his palm up to the boundary wall of the school. The seniors gazed through the window, expecting the boy to turn around and run back at any moment. But Neil walked on without a backward glance. He exited through a small gate hidden in the compound wall amidst ivy. The winding path that led to the graveyard was surrounded by trees which hid the moon and cast shadows. As Neil walked along the shadowy path, overgrown with grass and ferns, he heard the howl of a wolf. He entered the graveyard behind the school, turned right, and placed the organs in his hands on the first grave. Wiping his icky fingers on the gravestone, he folded his hands and said a small prayer for the dead soul. Neil turned around and headed back to school. As he walked away from the grave, he heard a whisper behind him.
Heart, liver, kidney.
Just then, something touched Neil's shoulder. He was startled and ran out of the graveyard with his heart in his mouth. Neil walked back towards St. Thomas School, his head held high, all set to be titled The Bravest of the Brave. He reached that portion of the unkempt path that was hidden amidst shadowy trees. Neil had an ambiguous yet strong feeling that something or someone was following him. He paused as he heard a rustle, and then, as clear as crystal, he heard a deep, sonorous voice repeat the words.
Heart, liver, kidney.
An owl hooted from a distant tree. Neil shrugged his shoulders and walked on to claim his title. As he walked back, he heard the same refrain intermittently.
Heart, liver, kidney. Heart, liver, kidney.
The urgency increased in the voice that followed him with every step that Neil took. He hastened his pace and ran as fast as his legs could carry him. The voice followed him just behind his heels. It followed him right up to the boundary wall of the school.
Heart, liver, kidney.
Breathless and with his heart pounding crazily, Neil entered the school premises. The voice following him stopped. He ran into the common room, expecting to see all the boys laugh as they saw Sanjay or some other boy entering the room after him, having played a silly practical joke successfully. Neil stood shell-shocked, for there was Sanjay standing in the middle of the room, and so were all the other 7 boys who had dragged him earlier that evening. Not a single boy was missing from the common room.
Neil's back!
A shout went up. The worn faces of the 8 older boys relaxed a little. The housemaster sighed with relief. Apparently, soon after Neil had left on his mission, the housemaster had walked into the common room. He had heard loud peals of laughter even after the bell for proceeding to the dormitories had been rung. A strong smell of formaldehyde had hit him as he entered the room. Seeing the jars from the biology lab, the housemaster had ticked off the boys. He threatened them with expulsion and got the 8 boys to admit the whole story. The housemaster was just about to send a search party out when Neil had walked into the common room. Neil and the younger boys were immediately sent up to the dormitories to sleep. The whole evening had been bizarre for Neil, who speculated in the dark without any answers. No one believed Neil's story. They scoffed at him. He dared everyone to go with him to the grave where he had placed the vital organs at night. The schoolboys laughed, but none of them took up the challenge. No one from St. Thomas School took the path that led to the graveyard ever again. And soon the episode was forgotten. All was well at St. Thomas. Or was it? 2 years later, on a full moon night, 4 boys took a shortcut through the graveyard. The sun had set. The boys were on their way back from an outing in the town and were getting late. They hurried past the graves. As they crossed the last one, they heard a rustle and a hoarse whisper that seemed to say,
Heart, liver, kidney.
on full moon nights, many a traveller who passes through the graveyard near St. Thomas Boys' School across Lake Naini in Nainital has heard a hoarse whisper.